Hi guys, on Sonali's book club today, I have a very, very, very special guest. An author whose books have, at various points of time in my life, whenever I have gone back and reread the books, have always given me a pearl of wisdom. So here I am, supremely excited to talk to my favorite author, Elif Shafak, and here we are, starting the conversation with her. Elif, really, welcome to the book club, and we're so excited to have you on our book club. At the beginning of the book club, one of the first few books that we did was um 40 Rules of Love, and uh, even today, I keep going back to that book, and I feel that as I grow, I find newer ways of understanding love and what love means. And it's so beautiful and so deep. And the connection that I have with that book is so amazing. Um, how did you write it? What was the process? I want to start with that book because it just resonates so much. And it's about love. And it's just so needed in today's world. Love can just solve so many problems, and we all as human beings kind of have forgotten how to love. So I would like to start with that book.
Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful, to join you. Thank you for having me. I would love to talk about the 40 Rules of Love, although I don't find it that easy, to be honest, because it's a multi-layered book. As you know, in a way, it's a book within a book. It's a love story within a love story. And I wanted to deal with these categories that we have in our minds, like what's a more superior form of love, what's a more mundane, spiritual, Eastern, Western. We tend to divide love into all these boxes, but I wanted to connect and find the essence.
Mhm.
So that's raw, maybe seemingly simple, but universal,
Mhm.
timeless, placeless essence of love. Is it possible to try to arrive at that? And I wrote it at a moment in my life when I needed to explore, to understand love better.
Mhm.
And it took me on so many journeys. And as you know, of course, this book talks about Rumi, who was an amazing poet, a real historical figure, but also Shams, who too was a real person. And that was not easy at all because when you have real historical characters, as a writer, you need liberty, you need freedom.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had a lot of respect for these characters. So, how do you
Yeah.
find the balance? And yet, at the same time, I didn't want to put them on a pedestal. I
Mhm.
didn't want to turn them into heroes or,
Mhm.
make them perfect. Nobody's perfect. No human being is perfect. So, the human elements, the universal humanness of love was something that I wanted to arrive at. And so that book took me through valleys of philosophy, poetry, history, spirituality, mysticism. And it was a transformative experience for me as well as a writer to to dream that story.
When you say you were going through something and you needed to understand love, if I'm not prying too much, could you kind of take us on what kind of journey was that? Because you're so right about this book, because it is for all of us who has ever connected with this book. It's always transformed us. It's always been at a point. There's some there's some sort of a there's some sort of an energy to that book, and you seem to pick it up exactly when you need it in your life. And I've had so many friends and people who have read it who have kind of said that I needed to read this. Oh my god, I needed to read this. Either all of us constantly need to read this book, or there is some sort of a power to this book, which that the energy that you've put into it while writing it, that it seems to find the reader just when the reader needs to read the book.
Mhm.
So I don't know what it is, but that is something that does happen with this book. So if I'm not trying,
Mhm.
would you kind of explain what was it that you were going through at that point of time?
Of course, and really what you said means so much to me. I think I wrote it at a time when I needed to take care of myself. And
Mm-hmm.
this might sound maybe strange because this is a book that talks about, love in the broadest sense possible. But
Mm.
at the same time, we should not forget that we all have an inner garden inside, and sometimes we neglect that inner garden, and then it starts to wither away. And then you realize, well, I need to water that garden. I need to take care of this garden. So to show compassion to ourselves. It was a time in my life when I was literally licking my own bruises and scars. I felt very lonely. I had been in Turkey put on trial for writing another novel, The
Mhm.
Bastard of Istanbul, and that was a very unnerving process. In Turkey, it's difficult to be a writer. Without going too much into all those details, all I can tell is words are heavy, and whatever you say can offend someone. So if you're a novelist, you need freedom of imagination, you need
Mhm.
freedom of speech. You
Mhm.
should be able to write about, wherever what the story takes you.
Right.
And that's difficult. But not only that, I think so many maybe elements were added to this, and I wrote it at a moment when I think I felt very vulnerable, and
Right.
and I want to talk about this because especially as women who are always active in our own fields, we never want to be seen as vulnerable. We
Right.
want to be, strong and always.
I think we are being judged so often for being like,
Yeah,
it's like every time we get an opportunity to work, it's like we're fighting the fact that women are stepping out and working. Oh my God, why did we give her this job? She should have stayed at home. Somewhere in our subconscious, we're fighting that so much that we are like going out there and we want to prove ourselves doubly or more, I would say.
absolutely. And it's so harsh. I mean, we judge ourselves a lot. And sometimes, without knowing, we judge each other as well. And I think we internalize the gaze of patriarchy a lot. So even when we're alone, when we look in the mirror, oh, we think, I'm not good enough, I'm not this enough or that enough. So that constant self criticism. So there are all these layers. But I think vulnerability is very human. It is not a sign of weakness. To be able to talk about emotions is actually a sign of strength because emotions are raw energy. It is okay to sometimes feel worried, anxious, angry, frustrated, even lonely. What matters is what you do with that raw source of energy. Can we turn it into something more constructive for
Mhm.
ourselves and for our communities? So, coming back to the book, I think it was a time for me to renew myself.
Right.
It was an act of renewal, and
Right.
for that, I needed compassion, love, not only self love, but love for my fellow human beings. And
Right.
I'm very grateful to this book because it helped me in a way to refine my feet, my own voice, and renew myself.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. So, in that sense, I am right about that energy because if this is the amount of feeling that has gone into it, no wonder there is this connection that has happened, and you've connected with the readers with that raw energy that you spoke about. And I love the way you put it that universal love is what you're talking about in the book, while it is somewhere deep inside you looking for that little kernel of pure love within yourself to love yourself. And basically, that's what it is, and that's what the book kind of leads us. The whole journey in the book is, it feels like, it's taking us on a broader journey of love, but actually, it is teaching us to love ourselves, and that's why probably all of us find each other in some sentence, some emotion, some pain, somewhere. Everybody finds a connection, and I don't think it's just the women. I think even the men. It's so universal. The book. It's beautiful. So, you just spoke about the book, The Bastard of Istanbul, and when you spoke about it, you wrote about how heavy the words were, how the words can offend, and all the trauma that you went through as an author with this book. Do you think in today's day and age has it become even more difficult to be an author? Have the words become heavier, in your words, to put it that way? Um, how do you look at the way the world is going for an author?
Yeah, I wish I could
Are you
say.
thinking a lot more before you write down? Are you able to shut that part out after your experience with the Bastard of Istanbul? Are you able to shut that out and say, I'm going to write what I want to write and let's see what happens? Or somewhere you, without realizing, somewhere at the back of your mind, are you holding yourself back?
You know, I think we have entered an age in which things are much, much harder,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for women in the public space.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a, female actress, a politician, writer, journalist, anyone, and there are also studies that show the verbal abuse that women have been receiving has also escalated during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, where democracy is in decline, it's very easy for authors to offend authorities with their
Right.
words. So you add that layer. In a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is it has become much, much harder. But I think there's an additional difficulty that women face because you have to deal with misogyny, you have to deal with sexism. Sometimes you are belittled. I come from a very patriarchal country. Patriarchy is universal, but in some places it's more condensed.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Turkey is we only, I mean, in general, we respect women only when they become very old in the eyes of the society. So we respect grandmothers, right? Because grandmothers are defeminized, desexualized. Until a woman is regarded as old, you have to go through so many struggles and you have to deal with so many layers of sexism. It's everywhere. If I may say this, I also make a distinction between information, knowledge, and wisdom. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we're living in an age in which we are bombarded by information. So there's way too much information, but very little knowledge and even less wisdom.
Oh my God, well
So
said.
every day we deal with snippets of information, but that's not knowledge. And certainly it's not wisdom. So let's deal with less information, but let's focus on knowledge. Knowledge comes to us from books, from slow journalism, from nuanced conversations. You cannot rush knowledge. And ultimately, let's aim for wisdom, which brings the mind and the heart together. It
Right.
needs emotional intelligence, empathy. So the rhythm of a novel and the rhythm of social media are completely different.
Yes, you're right. Absolutely. It's kind of the words you use. It's condensing our attention span. We're all getting into. I mean, I meet parents who are constantly saying kids don't want to read. I said, "Look, do you want to read?" I said, we are also struggling with it. Who have been readers, and yet we also struggle with it unless we kind of shut things down and say, "I'm switching off from the world when I pick up a book." And if you don't have the luxury of switching off, um, you meet most of the mothers and or young parents, I would say even fathers, who come and tell me that when the child is young and their attention span, the lives are so hurried that they can't sit down with that book. And we are going on less and less holidays. We don't take those kind of holidays anymore. We're just constantly running. And I don't know, I don't think any of us know where is it that we are running to, what is that goal that we are trying to achieve. And even to sit back and think, what are we actually trying to achieve? We don't really seem to sit back and do that and have the luxury to do that a lot of times, because that's the kind of a treadmill we are on, and we don't seem to be getting off that. And yeah, what you said was so true. uh,
Yeah.
in a book, when we were having a conversation, you mentioned that how when things are picked up without being in context, how that can offend. And we are so gotten so used to 40 words and just putting things into it, that you don't have the patience to kind of read it till the end and see where has this journey gone, where has this journey taken the author, and to understand, is it really offensive or is it actually not. um, I understand what is it that the kind of struggle that you as a writer must be going through. I just hope you can kind of get over it and keep giving us the books you're giving.
I appreciate you saying that. At the same time, because I'm a novelist, when I start a novel, when I'm in the middle of a novel, that world becomes my reality. So I really forget the so-called real world.
Oh,
And
lovely.
I completely shut it out because
Okay.
otherwise you can't write. And really, these imaginary characters become my friends. They enter my dreams. They shape my days and nights. that's the thing about the canvas of a novel is so big. It's just storyland,
Yeah.
with valleys and mountains and
Ah,
rivers and streams, and you get lost in that world.
yeah.
That's why, for me, particularly the genre of the novel, but literature in general, I think
Mhm.
I always associate it with freedom. I feel so free there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's very, very nice, nicely put. Um, you're a mother,
Yeah.
and when you say you go into these worlds, and these characters become your friend, I'm
Mm.
sure a lot of us as mothers want to know, how do you juggle it? How do you balance it?
Yeah, of course. Sometimes I hear some authors being very, you know, proud of their precise schedules, working
Mhm.
schedules. But I think it's usually male authors of a certain age who do this. They have a very exact, precise schedule every day. They work at the same hour, they finish at the same time. But for everyone else, we
Yeah.
juggle. We're juggling all the time, right? So sometimes you work during the morning, sometimes at night, sometimes in the afternoon. You literally carve out a space for yourself. And that's the reality of it. So I
Do you
can't.
think sometimes when you're talking to your child and or to your husband, or or what partner, whatever that zone is, that at your home, do the characters jump out and kind of speak, and you say, oh, okay, I'm not there in this world, I'm in this world right now, and do
Mm,
these worlds collide on a day-to-day basis?
they do. And also, of course, being a writer is a bit self-centered.
Hmm.
You are in that world all the time. And at the same time, being a mother is about giving a lot. So again, their energies can be slightly different.
Hmm.
And at the beginning, I struggled with this, to be honest, mostly because I used to live a more nomadic life.
Hmm.
And when you're a mother, you can't just live out of a suitcase. You have to
Hmm.
become more settled, and you have to have some habits and routines. And I was very scared of having routines. So it is a learning process. It's such a beautiful journey. And I have learned a lot, and it changes us, it transforms us. I think love transforms us, parenthood transforms us. You need to allow yourself to become a student of life. We don't learn it immediately.
How has this forming the habits, like you said, how has it changed your writing?
I mean, I am sure it added a lot.
Hmm.
But before then, I used to think, okay, I can't settle down anywhere because when you look at my biography, in a way, my own pedigree, I lived in very different cities, and I always retained this belief that, okay, all I need is a pen and a pencil,
Hmm.
and I can go wherever I want and try to find my voice. It's not easy at all, but
Hmm.
there was always this belief that my imagination was my only suitcase.
Right.
And when I
Beautiful.
went, and when I went actually through a postpartum depression, it
Hmm.
taught me so much. In Earlier, you were talking about how we're constantly rushing from one place to another,
Hmm.
and we rarely feel the need to slow down and look
Hmm.
within. But when you go through a depression, this might sound strange, but in a way, it's a golden opportunity for us to look within and to reassemble our pieces because you fall down so badly when you
Yeah.
go through a depression. All your pieces are scattered, and
Yeah.
you have to sit down and reconstruct the
Yeah.
self. And there's a chance that the new self will be better than the new one. It is painful. I'm not, underestimating, but
Yeah.
it's a moment of learning so much. So the second thing is, when you go through moments of anxiety or depression, we tend to think that we're the only ones, and
Yeah.
everyone else is so happy and perfect. Look, they're doing so well.
Yeah.
Actually, that's an illusion.
Hmm.
Everyone is struggling. So if I speak about my struggles, if someone else speaks about their struggles, if we hear each other's voices, then you realize actually you're not alone at all.
Is that what brought Black Milk out, the book?
Yes, indeed. And also, I think this is a book that has a lot of humor in it. Not humor in a condescending way, not the kind of humor that looks down upon either other people or your own self, but a more compassionate humor. that also teases and makes a little bit of fun, because sometimes, the things you shouldn't, you worry about, it's okay to smile at them a little bit, at your own flaws and failures. We don't have to be perfect, we don't have to be successful all the time. So that process was
I think in Black Milk you kind of bring out that there's so many other women inside you,
yeah.
and that helped me go through my postpartum, I would say, because suddenly I was like, okay, which one of Sonali is out right now, and what is this feeling, and it kind of helped me deal with it. So for me, I would say books have always taken me through the tough parts of my life and have made them not so tough, and have given me that sense of, like you said, the best way that you could, if you can smile at it and if you can laugh at some of those things, it just makes the journey so much more easier. When we were discussing about this process of yours and how you've grown in it, you were talking about your childhood, where or your earlier days when you were constantly moving, and that was how you were. The line you used was, my imagination was my suitcase as an author. But when, as a girl, as a child, when did you realize you wanted to be a writer, and when did you actually start this writing process?
I started writing at a very early age, but that's not because I was planning to become a novelist. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know such a thing was possible. There were
Mm-hmm.
no writers around me. I didn't know one could dedicate their own whole life to books, to writing. For me, it was more like an existential need. I started writing fiction because I thought life was very boring. I
Oh.
was an I was an I was an only child,
Mm-hmm.
and I was raised by two women. My mother was a single mom, a working mom, so she was away most of the time. And there was
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother, who was a bit more traditional, a bit more spiritual. She was a bit
Right,
of an oral storyteller, a bit of a
right.
healer. But as a child, I was alone so much, and life
Mm-hmm.
I thought was very boring. So when I discovered Storyland, that to me was much more real, much more colorful, much more interesting. And I
Right.
tried to go into that zone as often as I could. And books really became my friends. So
What did you enjoy reading, if as a child?
whatever I could find, whatever I could get my hands on, because there wasn't a big library in my grandmother's house. There was
Mm-hmm.
a limited number of books, so sometimes I would read them again and again,
Right.
imagining different endings. I
Yeah.
would read all the books in the school library, which again was very limited.
Mm-hmm.
But then around the time I was 11 years old, we moved to Spain because of my mother's job. And that opened up a completely new world in front of my eyes. Because then, slowly, I started reading in Spanish, in English, and I never stopped. So, there were ruptures in my life in a way, like you move from one place to another,
Right.
but also you get to know the literature of different cultures, of different countries. And that gave me a sense of continuity.
Nice, nice. Is there any particular genre that you kind of identify with more when you're reading? That you enjoy reading more. Is there something that's, say, like your comfort zone?
Yeah, I love reading, having eclectic reading lists,
Okay.
both fiction and nonfiction, but also from east and west, north and south. What I don't like is to read the same type of books over and over.
Mm-hmm.
It's the diversity that feeds, I think, our intellects and our hearts. So sometimes when readers, and it's usually male readers again who do this, they
Mm-hmm.
say, so much is happening in the world. I want to understand, of course, with all good intentions, they say this. I want to understand what's happening in the world, so I read about technology, politics, I read philosophy, history, political science. But I don't need fiction. I don't have time for fiction. My wife reads fiction. My girlfriend reads fiction.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, I feel very sad, because inside fiction, there is politics, there is philosophy, there is history, social psychology, technology, neuroscience. All of that is in the world of fiction. but also perhaps more importantly, inside fiction, there's emotional intelligence.
Oh my God,
And
beautiful.
I don't know a single human being who doesn't need emotional intelligence. So rather than saying, oh, I don't need that, I don't need this, let's travel across, that eclectic reading list. Let's be intellectual nomads. I love reading. Of course, I read lots of fiction primarily, but I also read political philosophy, but I also read cookbooks.
Oh,
I love reading cookbooks.
do you
Uh,
enjoy cooking?
I am very bad at cooking, but I love reading about food. So whatever speaks to us in that moment is the right book. I've never believed in this distinction between highbrow literature versus
Mhm.
lowbrow literature. Who even decides? I disregard all of that. But let's make the act of reading, the process of reading, constant in our lives.
Yeah, I must confess that I do have a bit when, I'm exhausted, I've had long schedules, and I'm like, just done with my comfort zone is going into fantasy fiction, science fiction, fantasy fiction is where I go into, and it's like literally, and I didn't realize it even as a child. It's like you just go into this world where you kind of switch off from this, go in there for a while, go through like a week, 2 weeks of just reading that, and then I'm out of it. And then probably I pick up that book again after, the next time there is a valley happening, and you feel the need for it. So I do kind of go into that zones. But what you said was very interesting. Yes, it is true. I think my travel, I would say, as a child, I've traveled the world. Through my books much before I could actually physically travel, and the exposure and the knowledge that books gave me, I think, was so much more, and has stood and has helped me in my real life so much more than my formal education, I would say. It's That's what books do. Stories do that. It's just such a rich way of education, actually, by telling stories.
I
It's beautiful. I wish our education system would understand that and value that. It would really make our children's life so much more easier also. But yes, that is something that I do feel. You are so comfortable in you're bilingual, and you're comfortable with both the languages. But how do you kind of do that? The rhythm is very different.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of put this together? I mean, which language do you think in? Let's put it that way.
And my earlier novels were written in Turkish first. And then about 17, maybe 18 years ago now, I switched to
This
writing
is
in
a
English.
crazy thing. I mean, who switches? I've never heard of. Most authors can't. I mean, you have somebody else translating their works. But here you are, you switched, and you're like, hey, I'm going to do this myself.
True, true. I mean, it was insane. It was irrational. Had I thought too much about it, I wouldn't have dared, to be honest. It was more like an instinct, almost like an animal instinct. I felt a bit suffocated. I needed a new zone of existence, a new
Mm,
zone of freedom.
mm,
And in a way, I experienced it almost like a migration. I
mhm.
felt like, okay, I'm going to migrate into
Right.
another language and find myself again there, which for a writer, especially if you're an established writer at that point in your life, is a scary thing because almost you lose everything and you have to start from scratch all over.
Yes.
It's not easy in the sense that the Turkish language is so different than English.
Exactly. The
Grammatically
rhythm is so different.
completely different. The rhythm, the grammar, the vocabulary. It's not like moving from, Spanish to French. These are completely
Right.
different planets we're talking about. And as you can hear, I mean, as we're speaking, I'm an immigrant in this language. So I'm
Yeah.
not a native speaker. I
Yeah.
will always be making mistakes, or there will be certain words I will never be able to pronounce the way a
Mhm.
native speaker would pronounce, you know. And as immigrants, we also know that there will always be a gap between the mind and the tongue. The
Mhm.
mind runs faster, and the tongue, the poor tongue, is trying to catch up. As immigrants, we want to crack better jokes, but we don't quite get it, the way we want. So you're always aware of what you fail to say rather than what you manage to say. And that can pull us down, but that can also push us further to pay more attention to nuances, the things that sometimes native speakers take for granted,
Right.
you study them. You put more, thought into them because you have to. So all I can tell you is, I feel connected to each language, Turkish and English, in a different way. Turkish for me is very emotional. It's the language of my childhood. It's the language of my grandmother. English for me is more cerebral. It's more intellectual, and I need both. That said, over the years, I realized if my writing has melancholy, sorrow, longing, I still find these things much easier to express in Turkish. But when it comes to humor, which I love and which I adore, and also irony, satire are much easier in English.
Amazing. The way what you said was that sometimes while the gap that is there, you feel like you're losing on a few things and you're not doing it justice. I mean, if this is what you feel with what you're writing, it's so complete for me as a reader. I mean, there is definitely no feeling there. It's your tongue is caught up with your mind definitely in the books. And if it has not, if you feel uh, that you've not put in everything that you thought of in English, then I really need to start learning Turkish, because then I need to start reading in Turkish so that I want to understand what is the gap in between, and I don't want to miss that, because that would be beautiful. So that is something that I'll have to do then.
Can I, just to follow up on what you said so eloquently, sometimes we are made to feel as if there's one proper way of speaking English, whether in terms of dialect or accent, pronunciation, grammar, you know, the, 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 the right way of speaking English.
Right.
Anyone who fails to speak in that way or to write in that way, well, they need to improve. Actually, I want to challenge that hierarchical way of looking, because first of all, language is a river, and like every river, it has several tides in it, several, right? So, and I think we can't reduce it to just one thread. We can't impose such hierarchies. Minorities have added so much into English, to the English language. Immigrants have contributed so much. And also regional differences are beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with people's accents. So I want to celebrate that diversity rather than pushing people into boxes of, hierarchies. That's wrong.
You're talking to an Indian with a very Indian accent, and we've been ruled by the English, so it is as much a part of our life, English, as is Hindi, and we have our own other native tongues also. So mostly you'll find most Indians like in conversant in three languages, because English being such a huge part of it. And this is a struggle that we go through all the time. Are we getting the accent right? Are we pronouncing it right? But I think what you said is so true. As long as we're getting the message across, we're fine. I only don't want my son to hear it, and because in school it's like, but why do I have to do it in the same way as everybody else does it? Is the thing that he's been coming back with. So that's a bit of a struggle that we'll have to say that till that system changes, you have to deal with it, and there's no way out of it. But you said it so beautifully that language is a river, and it's just flowing and meandering, and it's moving, there are so many other tributaries that come in, and smaller tributaries that are just joining into it. And yes, it's so beautifully put. Trust you to put it so beautifully. So, your latest book, The Missing Tree. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, it's, all my books are very close to my heart, but I've, in a way, just finished writing this, so it's very much alive.
Right.
Inside my mind and my heart. Basically, this is a story that takes place partly in the UK, but mostly in Cyprus.
Right.
And as you know, Cyprus is a beautiful island, beautiful people, north and south. However, it's also a place that has experienced war.
Sorry.
Shall I do it again, or?
Yeah. No, it is fine. Yeah.
As you know, this is a beautiful island with beautiful people north and south. Yet at the same time, it is a place that has experienced war and partition and division. As we're speaking, there's a border that cuts across the island that literally separates Christians from Muslims and Greek Cypriots from Turkish Cypriots. So the border, which is patrolled by United Nations, is drawn along religious lines and ethnic lines. And it's not easy to tell the story of such a complicated place, especially when the past is not a bygone affair. The past is not over yet, you know? It's still very much alive and breathing within this present moment. And the wounds they haven't healed yet. They're open. So I didn't know how to approach such a story without falling into the trap of nationalism, without falling into the trap of tribalism. And what gave me the courage to write this book was a tree, a fig tree, because I mean, trees are remarkable. I adore them, especially fig trees in this book. They're at the center. When you tell the story through the perspective of a tree, the notion of time changes, all these boxes of nationalisms, tribalisms disappear, and you obtain a completely different perspective. What I'm trying to say is, whenever human beings have destroyed each other in the name of nationalism, in the name of religious fundamentalism, or whatever, it's not only our lives that are being damaged, but also the lives of animals and trees and entire ecosystems. We're also destroying, you know, the nature itself. So I wanted to write a book that literally connects the dots and shows how they all matter, you know, human suffering, but also the suffering or the destruction of an ecosystem alongside.
You know, it's just so, my God, it is so applicable, so pertinent to today and what we are going through today. And I think I think this is the book that we should have. We're going to be finishing a book, and I think the next book that I would like to read is this, The Island of Missing Trees. I think this is what we should be reading right now, the book club, and maybe discussing this, especially with what is going on in the world. I think this is just the apt thing to read, and your insight and what you write would be so. I mean, I'm looking forward to it, and I really would want to know what you have to say and how you've described it, and how do I apply it to what is going on around me in the world today. And it's just so amazing how that has fallen into place. And here you're coming out with a book, and here this is this huge conflict that is going on, and we are all just hell bent on destroying ourselves and the climate around us. And it's authors like you and the books that you write that kind of give us some sort of a hope that maybe there is some sort of hope for the humanity. What do you feel? Do you think there is, or there are days when you go through the darkness of feeling that there's just no hope for us as humans, because we seem to be digging our own grave in that sense?
When people ask me if I'm an optimist, or do I consider myself one, I sometimes say jokingly that I can't be an optimist because I'm Turkish. It's not in my DNA. If you look at a map of Europe, and if you trace the river Danube with your finger, as you move eastward, by the time you reach, Eastern Europe, or for instance, Bulgaria, Romania, the Balkans, Black Sea, Anatolia, and then towards the Middle East, and also Central Asia, eastward, I think the level of optimism drops. So we don't do optimism that well. Understandably, we have complicated histories. But joking aside, I have a positive view on pessimism. I think it's okay for the mind to be a little bit pessimistic, because it keeps us more aware of what is at stake or what is going on, as long as we can keep our hearts hopeful. So I love this combination of optimism and pessimism. I think in life we need both, because too much optimism sometimes makes us a bit, complacent. You'll be fine. No, don't worry. But too much pessimism is also dangerous, and it's quite self-destructive because it pulls us down and it goes to apathy. Because if nothing is going to change, then why bother?
Yeah.
What we need is a healthy combination of both. So let us be
That's what
intellectually.
would lead to empathy, I think, if we had
Of
the healthy
course.
combination.
Yeah. I mean, let us keep the mind a little bit, pessimistic, but our hearts need to remain hopeful. And for that to happen, we need to connect beyond borders. When I listen to you, it inspires me because, I mean, look at us. We have grown up in different cultures and yet we connect and yet we understand each other and yet we find what we have in common. And that common ground is so big and so beautiful. So the moment we keep doing this, we keep learning about each other's struggles, stories, but also stories of resilience and strength. That
Yeah.
really inspires me. This is why I think that the worst thing we can do is to retreat into our cocoons
Yeah.
and become more atomized individuals. At a
Mm-hmm.
time like this, we need to do the opposite. We need to connect. Both
Reach out, connect,
reach
hold
out.
the.
Yeah, I think connect in three senses. Connect with ourselves as well, that inner garden.
Yeah.
Connect with our nature, climate, environment, and also connect with our fellow human beings beyond borders. So it's a time of global solidarity and global sisterhood.
Yes, I get what you're saying. Also, because when I went through when I went through my cancer treatment, and when I was good, there's an immense amount of clarity that kind of comes about when you're in that phase, and you realize that life is so uncomplicated. Actually, all the complications are those that we are adding on, because when you're there and you don't know if you're going to make it or not make it, suddenly the path is so clear. And for me, what I felt the path was, and which I think you will like kind of resonate with and understand what I'm saying, it's just a four-letter word, LOVE. The moment you can feel, look at any situation with a bit of love, it just falls into place. You get the right answers. What you say is right. The way you connect is the right way, and everything just kind of falls into place correctly. And I think it's just that, and we have just forgotten that it's as simple as that. And so again, like I come back as I started the conversation, I go back to it, and it's that, like you said, 40 rules of love keeps coming back because it's just that it's about love, and it's the love for the world, love for ourselves, everything. So beautifully said. It's just been so delightful to have this conversation with you. But before we end, I have one last question for you. We will be reading The Island of Missing Trees, but what is next? I think you're done with it. It's now the book is with us now. Now we take this book forward. But what do you move on to?
Thank you. Really, really, I'm so inspired by this conversation. When I finish a novel, I don't immediately start the next one. I have this pendulum because when
Okay.
I'm writing, I become a little bit. I'm an introvert by nature, so for me the easiest thing is just to stay in my room, surrounded with books. But I also believe, particularly as women or as minorities, we need to be in the public space too. We need to speak up and speak out. So that's a difficult balance sometimes.
Mm.
But when the book is over, the pendulum swings to the side and I become a more normal human being, a more social human being. I do more events and I love to go out and listen to people because I
Right.
think writers need to be two things. Primarily, we need to be good readers and
Mm-hmm.
good listeners.
Mm.
We have to know how to listen. I try to listen to not only what people are saying, but with what kind of energy they're saying what they're saying, what the universe is telling me in that moment
Right.
of time. So when the pendulum comes here, it's a time moment of reflection. You need to absorb, you need to think, read a lot, research a lot, listen a lot until the pendulum swings back again and then I start the new novel. At this moment, I'm just listening, thinking, reading,
Yeah.
and researching.
So there is no like a grain of thought, a germ somewhere, something which could be wiggling away. Is it there something that is going on at the back of the mind while the pendulum swings?
There is indeed. There is. It's a bit too early to speak about it.
Okay.
But it's actually it's a book in which rivers are going to play an important role.
Oh, beautiful. That sounds so lovely.
Thank you.
I love it. So we have the tree here and maybe hopefully something with a river later. I think it already sounds lovely and lyrical in that sense, because of the way the rivers move. There's so much of it's so much more lyrical.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that. And I can continue talking to you. I never want to say bye. I would love to keep doing this, but I'm sure you have other things to do. But thank you so much for giving us the time. And thank you so much for being here for the book club. And looking forward to having more conversations with you, reading many more books. And yes, the next book on SBC is going to be The Island of Missing Trees, and we're really looking forward to it. And I think what we would like to do is once we have the discussion, we'll probably kind of just send it to you so that if you could kind of go through it, what are the questions that the members are asking, and if you could just send them to you, and if you could just mail a couple of thoughts on it, that would be lovely if you could do that.
I would love to do that. Yes, please.
Yeah?
This
Done. So I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise, me too. Very much looking forward to this. But thank you.
So much. Thank
This
you.
has
It was
been
lovely.
Yeah.
Big hug, lots of love. I have never met you, but because of the amount I love your books, I feel like I know you. And so it's like when what we feel a lot of times with my fans, when this thing, we feel like we know you. And I feel that about you. I feel like I know you, and I don't feel like I've not met you, and I've never met you physically. I don't feel that. So a big virtual hug, lots of love. Keep writing, and I'm always looking forward to your books. Thank you so much.
It's been amazing. Thank you for every word.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.